I want to jump into a passage today. I don't typically just jump right into it. We set it up, but I think sets it up as much as anything. If you've got your Bible, go to Philippians 2, and you can mark it, pay attention to it. Like this is where the crux of where we're going to be today and build off of it. And then if you've got your app, maybe open it up, Philippians 2. Of course, we've got it on the screen as well if you don't have either of those. But Philippians 2, verse 14 says, "Do all things without grumbling or disputing." Your translation may say complaining. "So that you will prove yourselves to be blameless and innocent, children of God, above reproach in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you appear as lights in the world." The Apostle Paul saying, whatever you do, do it without complaining. So in this world, that you will appear as lights in this world, that you'll stand out, that you'll look different than everything else in this world. Now, that I think is a hard command for us as Americans. Don't complain. And I think it's hard because it's just naturally ingrained into us. And I say that because when we're kids and things don't go our way, what do? We pout, we cry, we tattletale, we throw a fit. Yeah, that's right. And so we have this idea about complaining, whatever it is. And so we get into adulthood, and then things don't go our way. And then what do? We complain, whatever it is. I mean, we'll drive through Whataburger, and they'll give us a Sonic burger that's the same thing in an orange wrapper, and you can't tell the difference, so you don't even complain about that. But you get home, and they don't have fries in there. And you're so upset that you got to call the manager and let them know and complain until you get a free meal out of the deal. And you think that it's your God-given right as an American that you deserve those processed, prepackaged, frozen potato products, and you don't get it, and then you're still not satisfied with the free meal. So you go on Cheers and Jeers and you yell and scream about how terrible they are for not putting French fries in your bag. Right? And God forbid one morning you drive through Starbucks and they put the wrong coffee creamer in your coffee. I mean, how many of y'all have had your day ruined because you had the wrong coffee creamer? Yeah, and we complain about it. And I mean, side note here, that's really God's way of punishing you for drinking coffee in a way that He didn't intend coffee to be drank. I mean, He made it black, strong. That's how you're supposed to drink coffee. That's another message probably for another day. But it ruins our day. And we like to say things when somebody says, "Hey, how's it going?" And we say, "Oh, I can't complain. If I did, nobody'd listen to me anyway." Ha, 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 right? But that's true. Like when you complain, nobody listens because everybody's got their own junk. Yeah. I mean, how many of y'all have complained about your coffee creamer and somebody took you aside and said, "I am so sorry. Can I spend some time praying for you that you can persevere through this trial that you're walking through and this difficult time that you're in?" No, because it's ridiculous, right? I mean, people complain about coffee creamer or fry, whatever, and most people are just like, "Give me a break," right? Paul's the same way. Paul's mindset when he's telling us don't complain because we are in this world and we'll be able to shine as lights in this world when we don't complain. But I think there's one issue that if we could fix this issue, then we could fix our problem with complaining. And I believe that when we complain, it destroys our hope, which is what we're talking about today. Because when we complain about the things that are going on in our lives, and we make that a point of emphasis, then ultimately it destroys our hope. And I think if we can fix one thing, change one thing, then I think we can change how much victory we walk with in this life. Because when we're walking around complaining about stuff that really doesn't matter, we're not walking in victory. And we're not shining as lights in this world. And the one thing that I think if we can fix, that I think we can change the way that we shine in this perverse generation is this. Next slide, please. Our focus. Change your focus. You read Scripture over and over and over again, it'll refer to it as setting your mind or fixing your eyes. What you set your mind on and what you fix your eyes on is what you're focusing on. And so often, and I find myself doing this at times, if I'm being honest with you, so often that we fix our eyes on the problems. We fix our eyes on the junk that's going on in our lives, whether we're having problems in our marriage. We fix our eyes on what the problems are. We set our minds on the issues that are going on with our kids. We fix our eyes on our problems at our job. We set our minds on our financial troubles. We fix our eyes on the problems of this world and in our culture and our society and on and on and on. We set our minds on those things, and so our focus is on the things of this world. And then what that does is it drives us to put our hope in things of this world so that we can come out of whatever problem we are having in this world. It's a matter of perspective and focus. Because when we've set our minds on things of this world and the problems that we're walking through and the trials and the difficulties that we have, then we typically turn to one of two things for hope to come out of those, either someone or something. And some of you may have some of this experience in what you've put your hope in the past. Some of these people that may be in your life that at some point you tried to put your hope in them. List looks something like this: your friends, your family, maybe a pastor, your church friends and family, a politician, a doctor. Anybody in this list, right, we may have at one point put our hope in to try to get us out of the situation or try to get us through the situation or ultimately rescue us from whatever troubles or hardships we're walking through, right? So someone, and maybe there was somebody else in your life that maybe isn't on this list, but typically they'll fall in one of these categories, or something, one of these things. You think money will fix your problem, a different job, the government, maybe they'll fix whatever's going on in my life. Some type of substance, either legally prescribed or otherwise. A religion. Well, I'll just go to church and that'll fix my problem. I'll just tell me what to do and I'll do these things and that'll fix my problem. Or a program, right? We want to really rely on and hope in a step-by-step program, whatever that is. And so we put our hope in these things of this world, and our hope ultimately becomes shattered because it's unsustainable. Now, you may have gone to a family member at some point, and they may have spoken some truth into your life, or they may have encouraged you in some way, and over time, a short period of time, that may have helped. But in the long run, I know many of you have probably put your hope in someone that has let you down in some form or fashion. Whoever that is. It's not sustainable. And I think so much of that is because we have unrealistic expectations for that person or that thing that we're putting our hope in to get us through the trials and the hardships, whatever we're walking through, because unrealistic expectations are ultimately going to lead to shattered hope and resentment. And if I were to ask all of you, where should we put our hope in? What's going to be your answer? Jesus. That's the good church word, right? Y'all know the answer. But the hard thing is doing it. The hard thing is actually trusting in Him and putting our hope in Him. And I want to look at a passage in Daniel 3. Many of you know the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And back up before Daniel 3, Daniel interprets a dream for King Nebuchadnezzar. He blesses him and puts him in charge. And Daniel then puts Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in administrative roles in Babylon. And so the beginning of chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar has built and created this 90-foot tall idol. Now, he had this built and created, and then what he wants to do is, anytime there's music that's played, a harp or a lyre or a flute or whatever it is, anytime those in Babylon heard the music, they were to stop what they were doing and worship this idol. Well, the fact that Nebuchadnezzar had this idol built and he made it, in essence, they're worshiping him. And so this decree went out all over the land that anyone who did not fall down and worship this idol that Nebuchadnezzar had made, then they would be thrown into a fiery furnace. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow down to this idol. And so some of the other leaders in the area come to Nebuchadnezzar and they say, hey, king, listen, This is what you said. I'm just telling you what you said. You said that if someone doesn't bow down to your idol, then they're going to be thrown in the fiery furnace. Well, guess what? Some people in your administration are refusing to bow down. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And you said that if they didn't, then you were going to throw them in the fire. So, king says, all right, call them in. So they come in there. They're standing there before the king. He says, all right, guys, I've heard that y'all don't want to bow down to the idol, and y'all know that I've said that anybody that doesn't bow down to the idol is going to have to be thrown into the fire. So we can solve all this problem. When you guys hear the music and you hear the time for you to bow down and worship, just bow down and worship the king or the idol. Won't be any problems. And they said, yeah, you know what? We don't even have to, we're not going to give this any kind of credibility. And look at what they say. We're going to pick up in verse 16 here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to give you an answer concerning this matter. Because if it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand." So they said, look, I don't have to answer you because our God is able to deliver us, and he will deliver us. Here's where they go. But, even if he doesn't, let's be clear about something. We're not serving your gods or worshiping the golden image that you set up. And so their mindset is one of, okay, I understand what you're saying, but we're not worshiping your idol because we know our God is faithful. Our hope is in him, not something that you made, not something of this world. And so we are going to trust God, and we know that he can. We know that he will. But even in his divine plan, he doesn't, you know what? I'm still not worshiping your God. And Nebuchadnezzar, your version, it says that his face changed on them. I mean, now, some of you that are having some marriage issues, you can relate. Because y'all, I mean, and it's, look, conversations I have, it's men and women. It's not one or the other. It's either one. Like all of a sudden things are going good and one of you says something or does something and your face changes. And you go from like, okay, let's work this out to, I can't stand you. Call Pastor Matt. I mean, multiply that by like 10,000, and that's what I imagine Nebuchadnezzar's face did when these guys that are in his administration said, no, I get it, but we're not doing it. And he says, okay, you guys are going to the fiery furnace. And he got so mad, he told them to crank it up exponentially hotter than they even had it to begin with. And so he had some men that took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire. Now, these men that are transporting, these three men, the king's men that are transporting Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we know that they fell in line and worshiped this God because they themselves weren't being thrown into the fire. Text tells us that as they were getting ready to throw them in the fire, that the fire was so hot that it killed those men, the king's men, that were delivering Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so they get there, and as they're throwing them into the fire, the king's men perish. And then Nebuchadnezzar looks, and look at what he says. He was astounded, and he stood up in haste. He said to his high officials, "Was it not 3 men that we cast into and bound into the midst of the fire?" And they replied to him, "Certainly, O king. Yeah, it was 3 of them, I promise." And he said, "Look, I see 4 men loosed, walking about in the midst of the fire without harm, and the appearance of the 4th is like the Son of God." Now, a lot of scholarship and most theologians believe that this was a pre-incarnate visitation of Jesus in this moment. I tend to believe that when Nebuchadnezzar looks and says that 4th one looks like the Son of God. And there's 4 of them in there, and the 3 of them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, had been bound in their clothes and wrapped up and tied up, and they get thrown in there. And there's a 4th one in there. and they're just up walking around. And the text tells us that when they came out, that Nebuchadnezzar finally had enough. Was like, this isn't even possible, because my guys were killed before they even got into the fire. And they stumbled in, and now there's 4. He brought them out. The text says that their hair wasn't singed. Any of y'all ever grilled over a charcoal? Like, as hot as that is, like every time I seem to singe the hair on my fingers. Their hair wasn't singed in this fiery furnace. Their clothes weren't burnt. They didn't even smell like smoke coming out of it. Now, how supernatural is that, right? And so we move forward into the further into the text and look at what is recorded here about Nebuchadnezzar. Now, remember, Paul's encouragement to us, do everything without complaining so that we shine as lights in this generation. Why is that? So that others around will see the hope that we have. Because we complain about all the little things that are going on in our lives, and it's the same inconveniences, which ultimately are what they are, and it's the same difficulties that we're walking through that people in this world that don't have any faith in Jesus, they're having to walk through the same thing. But they have no option. They have nothing to turn to except things of this world, so all they have to do is complain. Because there's no hope of coming out of it. And when they look at you and the trials and the tribulations and the inconveniences and the wrong coffee creamer that you have and how you respond to that, you have an opportunity to be a light in their world. But when we complain and we don't look any different than them, why would they want a hope that we say we have that we're not walking out? That's why the charge is for us to do everything without complaining, to shift our mind, to know and understand, like these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were almost dismissive about the issue. Like they had a death sentence. I mean, how many of you have ever stood before a judge and he said, all right, you going to the death chamber. That's it. You get a death sentence. No, if you haven't had that, then you look at what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did and their lack of complaining, and they were almost dismissive to the point of like, okay, maybe he'll deliver us. I think he can. I think he will. But even if he doesn't, you know what? I'm still going to praise him. There's no complaining through all of that. There's no complaining at all. They go and they stumble into, here's like, I love the flexibility of taking creative liberties in some of these stories, because I can imagine like those guys that were carrying them to the fire, and they go to push them in, and as they push them in, they fall. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they stumble, right? And they look up, and Jesus is standing there, and they're like, oh, hey, Jesus. But they didn't know it was Jesus. All right, just stay with me. Like, oh, hey, what's up? And he's like, what's up, guys? I've been waiting on y'all. He was out in front of them. He was already in the fiery furnace waiting on them to come in where they were. And then they come out, and then look at what Daniel says. The reaction of King Nebuchadnezzar was. Verse 26, here's where we pick it up. He came near to the door of the furnace, and he said, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, you guys come out. Servants of the Most High God, and come here. So they came out of the fire. The satraps, the prefects, the governors, the king's high officials, they all gathered around. These are the guys that came and said, hey, king, these 3 guys aren't worshiping your idol. Remember, you said you're going to throw them in the fire. Now, these same group of people are coming here, and they're gathered around, and they saw these men that the fire had no effect on their bodies, the hair of their heads, their trousers, nor they had even smell that came upon them. Jump ahead to chapter 4 here. Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language that lived in all the earth, may your peace abound. It has seemed good to me to declare the signs and wonders which the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. That should be our hope and our mindset about how we walk in this life, not complaining. That those in our circles of influence look at us and they say, I don't understand why you have the hope that you have, but I want what you have, that ultimately leads to them praising the same Jesus that you believe in because you have that hope. And knowing and understanding what the reality of our circumstances and our problems are, the focus, but changing the mindset and the perspective about our trials. Because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their mindset about the trial they were about to go into, they had no worry or no fear whatsoever. Their mindset was, whatever happens, I'm praising God. Look at what Paul says in Romans 8:24 through 25, because I think this is how where the rubber meets the road for us and how we shift our focus and our mindset about what's going on. Romans 8. In hope we have been saved. But hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what he already sees? If we hope for what we do not see, with perseverance we eagerly wait for it. And then he talks about, in 2 Corinthians, our perspective about the things of this earth and this world. Look at how he minimizes and somewhat dismisses the things that we go through. Momentary, light affliction. Now, how many of us have been in the moment of a mess, of some stuff maybe we've gotten ourselves into or that someone else has done to us and that's created chaos in our world, and we have the mindset and perspective that this is a big deal. Like this is the worst thing that could ever happen in the history of mankind. Paul says it's momentary and it's light. Like, let's put things in perspective, okay? These things are momentary and light and producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. Now, here's where he makes it clear about how we can consider the things that are going on in our world as light and momentary. Look at what he says, verse 18. Well, we look not at the things which are seen. So don't look down at the things that are going on in your life. You look around at the problems and the things that are happening. He says, no. Don't look at those. Look at the things which aren't seen. Have a heavenly perspective about who you are and where you are. For the things which are seen, these things of this world are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. So often we work in the temporal and the temporary and the things that are going on in our day-to-day lives, and we fix our eyes on those things, and those things fade away. And so many of you have been through trials and tribulations and hard times, and some of you are walking through some right now. But those of you that have been through some and you've come out on the other side, you probably can remember, because in conversations I've had, I know I'm not alone, but maybe you have or haven't, but so often we're walking in the midst of the trials and the issues, and we're thinking, I'm never going to get out of this. This is never going to end. This is going to ruin my life. And you walk through it and you get out on the other side and you look back and you think, that wasn't so bad. And you look and you see how God was there all the time. And we get into whatever the next trial, whatever the next tribulation, whatever the next problem is in our life, and we forget what God has done before. And we don't consider that God is already out in front of us, waiting on us in the fire. And when we're there, He's just like, hey, you guys just relax. I got this. But we're too busy setting our mind on the things of this earth and putting our hope in things of this earth and putting unrealistic expectations on someone or something. The only unrealistic expectation you can put on God is something that is in contrary to this word. If it's contradictory to His Word, it's an unrealistic expectation. But you and I both know the expectation that we have to put our hope in Him is sustainable. It's not an unrealistic expectation because He has shown Himself to be faithful since the beginning in our own lives and in the lives of others. And God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But we want a STEP program to help us, don't we? We want a STEP program to put our hope in a STEP program. So, because I love y'all so much, I developed a HOPE program. It's called the T3 HOPE program. 3 steps to hope. And they all begin with T. See how clever that is? Here's the first one. Be thankful. Be thankful. Looking at the world around you and seeing all the blessings that you have and seeing the way that God is operating and moving, being thankful for those things, it's amazing how it changes your mindset. It's the exact opposite of complaining. Being thankful for what you have, as opposed to minor inconveniences that may come up in our lives that destroy our hope so often from time to time, day after day. But being thankful and having a mindset of being thankful, and in everything that we do, thanking and praising God, and considering getting the wrong coffee creamer in your coffee. And I keep bringing it up because we trivialize so many things and we make such a big deal over little inconvenient things that when the big things come, we're completely destroyed. We can't even handle getting bad coffee. How are we going to handle having a bad marriage? Maybe start considering getting the wrong coffee as an opportunity to be a light in the darkness of a barista's life who's going through some junk and who's distracted and just forgot to put the right creamer in or forgot to put creamer at all in and gave you the wrong thing, and you're so mad because you were inconvenienced over an $8 cup of coffee that you can't stop to consider how you might be able to be a light in this darkness. And being thankful that God's provided you the opportunity to buy an $8 cup of coffee, to be in front of someone who may need to see how you react and you respond to something not going your way. So what? Don't come to me and complain about your coffee. We got bigger things going on in our lives. God wants to speak into those in our lives and in those circumstances and in those situations. He wants to give us hope. And I believe that the start of that is being thankful for what He has done and what He is doing and what you anticipate and believe He will do in the future. That's step 1, is being thankful. Step 2 is to turn. Now, some of the mess y'all are in is because you are allowing sin to reign in your body. That's just the reality. But we know that happens and maybe has happened in your life, and it's our own fault. We bring it in, and sin creates destruction. So if you're in the middle of that right now, turn away from that. If you're putting your hope in someone to get you through a trial or a hard time or to overcome something in your life, turn from that someone. If you're putting your hope in something, money, the job, the government, a religious structure, a program, turn from that and turn to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, that He's begun this work in us and He's promised to carry it out to fruition. So we can stand on that promise. It's not an unrealistic expectation to expect Him to do what He said He's going to do. So stand on that. So turn. Turn from whatever it is you're putting your hope in, turn to Jesus. The last step of the T3 Hope program is this: trust. Trust God. Trust God to do what He's always done. Trust God that He's out in front of you, that whatever trial or fire might be waiting on you this afternoon or tomorrow or next week or next month or next year or next decade, whatever it is, trust and know that He's working out in front of you. And that when the world says, hey, try this or do this or go talk to this person or go do that person, they'll help you through it. The temptation is to put your trust in that person or that thing. Trust in Jesus. Trust in the one who's been there from the beginning, who's with you today, and who will be ahead of you and be with you tomorrow. Where we fix our eyes, where we set our mind, where we focus, determines how much hope we have, determines whether or not our hope will be solidified or whether or not it will be shattered. My challenge and my encouragement to you today is to fix your eyes on Jesus and put your hope in Him. He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. And He's out in front waiting on you to walk you through it. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for your Son. Thank you for your promise that, God, you started the work in us and that you're going to finish it. God, I pray that we're sensitive to your Spirit as He reminds us where the source of our hope can be so that we can walk in victory in this life. And we don't have to get beat up. We don't have to be tossed around. We don't have to have our hope destroyed because we have unrealistic expectations on something that could never give us hope anyway. But God, thank you for being a sustainable, unchanging God in whom we can rest our hope in. Father, for the many that are here today that are struggling with something in their lives, so many different things that are affecting our lives and our confidence, as we talked about last week, and our hope and the ability for us to stand firm. God, the attacks of the enemy, where people's lives are just turned upside down. And in many cases, there's chaos and destruction that's happening. God, I pray today your Spirit has planted seeds in their hearts and their minds, and that you will point them and guide them, and that they will take those steps to put their hope and their faith and their trust in you to overcome the season, the temporary, the light moments of affliction and hardships that they're in, and that they'll be able to walk in victory. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.